Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm the president of the Product Managers Association Los Angeles. We are very excited to have you with us this morning. We have a terrific program. We have Drew Falkman of Modus Create, who's going to do a fireside chat with Todd Olson of Pendo with his new book on product-led organizations. Before we jump into that, just want to give you guys a quick review of who PMA is. We're the Product Managers Association Los Angeles. We're the largest product organization in LA. We have over 2,500 members, and we do a few things. We put on events such as the one you're attending today, and we try to have a monthly cadence. We tried to adjust to COVID, so we moved to virtual events. We have a large conference that we put on every year. This year, again, we made it to a virtual format. We just held it in October and was on product-led organizations or leading product in times of crisis. If you didn't catch it, Jen Robinson did a terrific keynote speaker, Jen Robinson of Zephyr in LA. We have the recording on our YouTube site if you're interested in that. And the last thing we do is we also have a mentorship program. So we are finishing up our first group, and we're actually starting to look for our next cohort that would start in February or January, I guess, the winter quarter. If you have, it is geared towards juniors and seniors in college, trying to create a more diverse next generation of product managers and trying to help underrepresented groups find their way into product. It is not the most straightforward path to getting into product, as we all know there's no classes on it. So we kicked off this mentorship program to try to help folks get into product who may not find a way otherwise. So if you're interested in being a mentor, we do one-on-one mentoring. It's a terrific opportunity to give back. We'll drop a link in the chat room or reach out to myself or Brittany Russ. And if you know any students who fall into that demographic and are looking for a way into product and are looking for a little more help, please also let us know. We're looking for mentees as well. And the last thing before we kick it off and start our program, we're all product managers here. We like to experiment and try new things. We're trying to find a way to better connect our members who have jobs available with those who may be looking. So this morning, unfortunately, Eric Lodge of Omaze wasn't able to join us, but he shared a couple openings he has at Omaze. And I'll just take a second to just tell you a little bit about these jobs. They're looking for folks with 3 years product management experience. And Omaze is basically, it helps charities accelerate fundraising efforts through unique fundraising platform. It's kind of like a GoFundMe, but specifically for charities. Eric is amazing. They're growing out their product team. And if you want to work for amazing people doing good work and worthwhile efforts, please reach out to Eric Lodge. I'll drop his information in the link or myself, and we'll help get you more information about the senior product manager position. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Drew Falkman of Modus Create, who's going to introduce our fireside chat with Todd Olson. So thank you so much. And Drew, here you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. Appreciate it. Hey, Todd, how you doing?
I'm well. How you doing, Drew?
I'm doing really good. So by way of quick intro, my name is Drew Falkman. I'm the Director of Strategy at Modus Create. We're a digital transformation consulting company. And so strategy is, most of what we do is product strategy. And in fact, a lot of it really has to do with helping organizations to be product-led. So I was really excited to have an opportunity to talk to Todd today because we're Pendo partners. And this book is awesome and really sort of poignant in today's atmosphere as companies are moving in this direction. By way of quick introduction, Todd is the CEO of Pendo, which is a product management software suite, and he can talk more about it over the course of our talk. He's been in product for a long time. He's got a storied history, starting with his own company called Cerebellum that he co-founded and ended up running, growing fairly large. He's been VP of product at TogetherSoft. He had another company called 6th Sense Analytics, which he sold to Rally, which went IPO. And after that, he started Pendo. And I was thinking it might be interested because I've actually always wondered what was sort of the nexus of Pendo, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, well, thanks, Drew. I think that background just makes me feel old when Drew says that. I've just been doing this for a while. So, but yeah, no, the inspiration for Pendo came from my work at Rally just prior to this, and as you said, I led the product team there, and I was constantly seeking ways to get good insights on how people are using our products. Invariably, you ship something, you think it did really, really well, and you get feedback 6-8 months later that it wasn't getting adopted as you expected. And that's frustrating. No one likes going through the motions of conceiving of something, building it, testing it, shipping it, and later to find out this kind of missing the mark and isn't getting adopted as you desired. So that kind of led me there to start trying to get more insights into how things were going. And it's hard. There's, anytime you're trying to get internal data or internal tools, that's always a difficult trade-off when you're building features for customers. I found that it was always something we could convince ourselves to do without. Yet adoption is a critically important leading indicator of health. If people aren't using your software and they aren't using your advanced pieces of your software, then you run the risk of churn. And so like that, living that pain firsthand was kind of the genesis of the Pendo idea. And
what did it start with? What was sort of the first MVP aspect of Pendo?
Yeah. So we launched our first, let's call it alpha product, in April of 2014. And at the very beginning, it was mostly focused around analytics. It was validating this whole idea of, the way we work is you drop us in and we collect everything. So we have this collect everything, developer-free auto track product data. And, it was kind of, we had no idea how much data that actually meant. There's a lot of things to validate when we first did it. But then shortly thereafter, I'd say even as early as May of that year, so month after our first release, we did add in this notion of being able to do in-app messaging. So targeted tooltips, light boxes. And the vision was actually simple. I never wanted to just have an analytics company. Actually, 6 Sense Analytics, which you cited in my bio, was an analytics company. It's the company I sold to Rally. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback I got leading that company was, what do I do with all this? So you tell me all this data, like what's the so what and what's the next? And I do think that one of the reasons that 6 Sense been a good fit for Rally at the time is that Rally was a bit of the so what. Okay, this is what you do with it. This product can have you do planning, et cetera, manage your whole life cycle. But coming out of the gate with Pendo, I knew I had to have a so what. I didn't want the so what to be another company. Then that puts me at risk of never really delivering on our value prop. So we early on delivered this notion of that messaging to be kind of the so what. Okay, well, if you learn that people aren't doing this, why don't you try to get them to do it? Why don't you try to nudge them? Or I think people often think people don't use things because it's not valuable. A lot of times it's just awareness, discoverability. It's hard. I as an example, last evening upgraded my iPad to iOS 14. I have no idea what it does that iOS 13 didn't do. And honestly, it's like some combination of swipes and stretches and whatever to kind of discover these new features on my own. It's challenging. And so if I don't use a new feature in iOS 14, it's probably not that it's not cool. It's probably not that I don't think it's valuable. It's probably just I have no idea what it's even doing and how to get it to work. So it's to me, one of the biggest challenges in the way we consume and deliver software now is this whole software is constantly coming out. There's new editions of it. How do we keep up with the change? How do we learn what exists so we can honestly fully realize the value of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets complicated because you have, not only do you have to update existing users of where new things are and what new things are, but you can also have new users come in at the same time. And now they have all these more things that they have to digest and figure out. So totally agree. What are you seeing in terms of, because you have this vantage point being an analytics software as a service, what are you seeing in terms of what's happening with companies out there and any macro trends that you might be seeing, maybe COVID related or otherwise in in today's economy.
Yeah, well, I am saying, of course, more people want to get more visibility in what's going on in their product. And when I say more people, I'm probably referring to more traditional businesses. Sure, like very cutting edge technology companies have been doing this for years. And if you're one of those companies listening in, you're probably like, oh, I've been doing that for 5-10 years. But there's plenty of companies that were not. And we're seeing a growing number of those businesses adopted. And when I say those businesses, sometimes it's traditional businesses. And this is where I think COVID has accelerated a lot of this change, is that every company, of course, is having to rely more on their digital channels. And henceforth, they want more visibility in what's going on in them. And that includes banks, insurance companies, healthcare companies. Of course, we've seen very visibly the rise in digital learning and sectors like telehealth. Those are kind of obvious. But even just general banks, more and more people, obviously with branches closed or people even if they're open, people are uncomfortable just taking unnecessary risks. They're being forced to use digital interfaces. And a lot of times we don't know what's even in these digital interfaces. We're less aware. So like being educated, being onboarded, maybe, things are newer than when I was last in this interface. So I think those are kind of the key challenges I'm seeing product management.
So this, if anyone hasn't seen it, this is Todd's new book, The Product-Led Organization. And it was really interesting to me as sort of a product person, is in a lot of ways, it's like best practices, product management. And what I'm seeing is that's organizations now are sort of owning product management almost as the corporate strategy, which is fascinating to me. Are you seeing, one of the questions I have is, I think for like a software as a service product, it becomes pretty obvious you have to do these things, and you can lead with trials and some of this sort of general product-led stuff. What about these other companies, like maybe service companies or live experience or other companies that maybe aren't quite as software as a service? What tips can you have for them and how they should be product-led?
Well, very often those companies now, what we're seeing obviously is a growing trend, this notion of a digital companion or digital companion app, something that goes alongside a physical experience to help guide you through it. Pretty much any in-person experience now is going to give you something like that, just to, again, you often see features like overviews, schedules, community building, being able to like meet up with people while you're in a physical space. I think that's an interesting area. At the end of the day, even if I'm doing something that's more physical, I'm probably going to be less comfortable just walking up to a human and speaking with them than I was before. So if you're trying to solicit feedback from me or engage with me, having a digital companion app, it's kind of cool. What I'm seeing, I'm sure everyone this LinkedIn Live is seeing too, like the use of QR codes. This QR code thing, it's been around for a long time. And I remember I think before I started Pendo, I was like, maybe I should have come here on QR codes. It seems like it could be important one day. Of course, I don't think that's really happened, but that's a good choice to do Pendo versus that. But now you're seeing them on like people's checks for paying bills in restaurants. You're seeing them sprout up all sorts of interesting places. Like my kids know what QR codes are and how to use them, and well, that's a pretty neat way to blend a physical experience and a digital experience, where none of us are going to be typing in all those URLs. That's painful. That's not a good experience. Just being like, flash the camera up, boom. That's pretty cool. So I'm seeing those types of creative blends occur now more so than ever before, and it feels cool. It feels like there's going to be more of the future. No one like typing in the URL anyway. Now these things have become more pervasive. It's just a way that it creates a better digital experience.
Yep. What about like PQLs or PQL means product qualified lead. I know in the product-led growth community, that's a big thing that people talk about, as you sort of are able to really know more about who people are and what they are and get much more qualified leads because they're using things. Is that something these companies should think about? Or
look, now that I went into my physical storefront, I took a picture of this QR code. It took me to an app. Maybe I completed a purchase or I just viewed a menu. I go about my way. I go home. I'm still on that web page. I go back to it. Why not hit me up and see, hey, how was the experience? Did you enjoy it? Was it good? If not, collect good qualitative feedback, which is a way, of course, to improve your experience. But hey, here's an upcoming schedule. Would you like to come back? We can, I don't know, add it to your calendar or do something. I mean, that's a more creative way to do a PQL. It's going to get that person back into the physical menu. But once you create a connection with a customer, it's an opportunity for me. And yeah, I think they should be thinking about how every interaction with a customer is one where you're thinking of the customer first, and you're trying to drive more engagement. I like great books too. Nir Eyal's Hooked. I mean, you gotta create that viral loop. You gotta get them back into your product somehow, and these digital interfaces are a great way to do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and you have, with that whole omni-channel approach, you have so many different ways that you can touch them through the mobile app and through email and through your web app and in-person experience, if that's part of it. One of the interesting things that I hadn't really thought about with product-led is there are times when you should have a human in the process, and I know working with you guys, there are times when we sort of come in and help people out and really get them into the software and get them to use it. How do you know when to insert a human into the process and when to have that personal experience be part of it?
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes you don't know, and sometimes you just got to experiment with it, right? And I think that's completely okay. I talk about experimentation a lot in the book, but something's happening, and something that starts with instinct. Do you feel like you could be doing better? But even if there's no instinct, I mean, run a test, run an experiment, bring a human in. I've talked pretty openly about the early days of Pendo, how we did engage. For a while we started off completely, of course, product-led, no human interaction, and I wasn't getting the conversion I wanted. We weren't getting the growth that we wanted, day one. And of course, we're doing surveys and things like that. But what we came to find out very quickly is that people didn't really understand what we did. It wasn't the product wasn't good. They had no context coming into it. It was different. It was innovative. Like there hadn't been a thing like that before. So having a quick introduction at the beginning of the experience to kind of level set the person's expectation, give them a sense for how to think about it, end up driving better results. And another great example is Superhuman, which Superhuman requires a human onboarding session. And I don't think anyone said they're not product led. I don't. Like, they're very product led. But I'm just full disclosure, I am a Superhuman customer, and honestly, part of it was just the intellectual curiosity of this product led company that uses humans on board. Like it was so, for a B2C company especially. But I gotta admit, if they didn't show me those things, it would have taken me like weeks to replicate that in a product led fashion. Because they forced me to try some things that I probably wouldn't have tried on my own. Because think about it, you go do email and you get into your inbox and you see 100 items, your brain starts thinking, I want to go solve each one of those 100 items. You're not like, oh, I want in my inbox start exploring all these cool features of these things. Yeah, some of you on the phone are probably amazing at zero inbox. I'm not one of those amazing people. Or carrying a few extra stragglers around. So I don't have like spare time when I'm looking at email to like play around with things. So the human-led onboarding was really powerful because it forced the user to do something unnatural. Maybe that's the bar. If you feel like you need to force the user to do something a little unnatural, doing that product led is very difficult. Mm-hmm. Guess what? You give me something unnatural on my screen, I can hit a button around it. I can always, but you force me to talk to a human, I'm going to do something unnatural. And I think that's sometimes needed for growth, for innovation, for things that are really unique.
Yeah. There is sometimes a learning curve to do something a better way, but you have to do that change first, which is hard.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the things in your book, you talk about finding the right leading indicators. Do you have any pointers for companies that are really struggling to find the leading indicators? And just to be clear, if anyone isn't familiar, their leading indicators are things that you can track right away. They're clicks, they're pages people are going to, whereas lagging indicators are things like revenue and subscriptions and these things that take more time. And we want to track those lagging because those are really the things we're at. But in order to know if we're trending that way, it's the leading indicators that sort of tell us what's happening in real time. So anyway, thoughts on finding the right ones?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways to do this, and there's varying degrees of leading indicators, so like let's use some quick examples like retention, your churn, I guess, is the inverse of retention. Very much lagging indicator. Once you lost a customer, it's kind of late to do anything about it. But then let's say I introduce NPS, Net Promoter Score, in it, where I'm asking someone would they recommend something, and now if I get that data 6 months before a renewal and they tell me no, they won't, I have 6 months to try to change that person's opinion, because chances are, I know it's not the same question. Will you renew? The question is, would you recommend? If someone will recommend, let's just hazard a guess they also wouldn't renew. And if someone would absolutely recommend, they're probably more likely to renew. So that's a really great example of one way of looking at a leading indicator. The other thing that I always go back to is, and some folks on the phone may be familiar with this exercise of the 5 whys. Okay, we lost this customer. Well, why? Oh, well, the person we sold to left. Okay, so that's champion movie. Can we measure that? Can we measure when champions leave? And can we measure when, maybe that's interesting. Or, then maybe the answer maybe been like they didn't get value out of the product. Can we measure where they got value out of the product? Well, that's kind of hard. Can we measure whether they use the product? Well, yeah, we can do that. Let's just say if they're not using it at all, they're not getting value. Okay, seems like a fair. So you work backwards using this why technique, and you're going to get to things that are measurable and are leading indicators. Now the question will come to, are they good leading indicators? For example, are people that have, low adoption of certain capabilities are more likely to leave versus not? You can use statistics, you can use regression analysis, you can basically start looking for correlations, and there's pretty known mathematical ways to do that. But I think, if you care about that level of precision, it's certainly capable to answer that question.
Yeah. So what about aha moments, right? Like those are the moments where you get into a piece of software and you realize, oh, this is going to be awesome. How do you find those? How do you know what that is?
Yeah. Look, I think these aha moments, these are the magical moments that pretty much all software has. And you can learn it by a few ways. And I guess I touched a little bit on my previous answer, where you can start
sorry to interrupt, but maybe you can explain more about like what a multivariate regression analysis is and how you might do that. I don't know if you have any examples or anything.
Yeah, I didn't bring on my calculators to show people detailed mathematics, but I can kind of describe to people kind of how logically to think about it.
That's perfect.
But let's just assume there's a set of things that a customer can do in your product. Amongst those sets of things, where are there tighter correlations between doing one of those things and whether that account retains or not? And by separating them out individually, because here's the problem: someone retains, and let's say they did 6 of the things. Well, how do you know which one of those things are the ones that are the more leading indicators? So you have to look at it on an individualized basis and split apart cohorts between people who did those things and did not do those things, and look at the differences in the numbers between those two segments. If you do that on a case-by-case basis, it should be apparent which ones have statistically higher retention over time, right? So that's kind of the analysis that we worked with customers on. Now that's kind of half my answer. There is also a little bit of an art to this, because at some level, what if there's something that you think is an aha moment, meaning you believe it's core to your product, but no one's using it. Because you kind of get to a circumstance where at least I've seen data where the N being the number of people that have used this aha moment is so low that there isn't real statistical significance, right? And then it's a bit of a leap of faith, and then you need to find ways to drive people to use that thing to then run a proper experiment to understand if it had a positive effects. So I would be cognizant of that like if you're trying to separate the cohorts, people that do something versus not, make sure the cohort's large enough for the people that actually do it. Because if it's not, then that itself is going to bias, basically bias your sample. But that's how I kind of think about that, those items. And then, you can always sprinkle in a little qualitative surveys. Like if you ask enough people what you can't live without, and they tell you, these 3 features, those probably feel like your aha moments, or at least they're part of them.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, there is an art and science to it. I can see that there's you kind of have to have, you look at the data and then you use some intuition and then you experiment and then go back, and either pivot, persevere, depending on what you get from that.
Absolutely.
What about free trials? How do you know when to give a free trial? I think for some software companies it works, for others they don't want to, and there's also that fine line of you don't want to give too much, but you want to give enough so that they can see the value of it. There's a lot there, I feel.
Well, look, I think there's a ton. Free itself could be an hour-long discussion over different models. Let's just hone in on your question, which is specifically free trials. Trial implies that it's not free forever. And look, I think if you can have people try your product and it's a good product, you're a product-led business, I think you should think about doing it. So why wouldn't you do it? You wouldn't do it in cases where maybe there's some barriers that are compliance or security related. Like you could be selling a type of healthcare product that, the amount of hoops you have to go through to get security sign off just to turn it on is basically the same hoops as to sell a deal. Therefore, you may not want to do it. And or people won't, some instances, people want to have a signed agreement before they start sending you a piece of data because it's that sensitive of information. Those are really hard to do free trials. And, in that instance, I've also seen another intermediate step of a sandbox instance or demo instance. People can log into an actual version of the product. It's not their data, but it's sample data just to get them a feel for how to touch it. It's not the same thing as a free trial, but I think it's another good option for those trying to employ product-led techniques that may have other inhibiting factors. So, but there may be situations where you can't do a trial, and that's okay. That's okay. But there's other ways to get people experiencing the product. What I'm usually against is if I'm a buyer of something, I want the ability to at least touch the product before I use it. I want to get a sense for it. And I guess I can't, like a consumable, like obviously it's hard to trial a piece of food, right? I mean, give it back after you're done trying it. So maybe if your product's like food, like a consumable, then it's kind of impossible. It's like shoes, running shoes. I mean, once you start putting your sweaty feet into a pair of shoes, like you're not sending the thing back, right?
Right. And it's not the same running around a store with it as it's going to be running on the street.
Exactly. So the best product-led techniques is reviews, obviously reviews. And I talk about reviews a lot in the book and how to foster reviews. But I think the more the review connects with the prospects individually, the better. That means, I want to know that, people, my size, my fitness level, my age, my passion for running, as an example, all think this thing, and I want to get some negatives. Like, I want to know what, like, no product is perfect. I want them to tell me, like, this is what I love about this thing, this is what I'm not. And if there's quality reviews like that, it'll probably drive a purchase for me without actually trying it. So, but if I feel like it's comprehensive, then you always feel better if it's comprehensive.
How do you get reviews? How do you make sure people give you that feedback instead of just leaving in frustration or just being generally happy but not sharing it?
I think you got to constantly ask, and then once you ask, you got to take action on it. So I go back to NPS as an example again. If someone gives you a 9 or a 10 on an NPS, meaning they're telling you that they would recommend you if asked, follow up with, hey, would you give a review? Like, they just said they would say good things. So maybe ask them to say good things right there. Maybe they're in a good mood to do it. Like, that's a great way to do it. That's a product-led technique. And you can think about iOS as it's built in the operating system, as is Android. So it's kind of core to that experience now. But if your product doesn't do this, you're missing out on an opportunity to foster reviews. You can even, reach out to people. We've done techniques at Pendo where, let's say we're trying to get a review of a specific area of our product. Mm-hmm. We may reach out to the top 10 users of it. Hey, we noticed that you're really active users of this. Do you mind giving us your feedback on what you think about it and what you love, or just, love or hate, you like or dislike, whatever, and that's a great way to get good qualitative feedback as well. But then the key, as I touched on earlier, do something with it. You ask someone to do something for you, check back in, like, hey, you told us this, we now prioritize these 3 things to address it. Or, hey, you did this, we're not doing it, but here's why, So look, the last thing you ever want to be as a business is a black hole, black box, whatever. You don't want to pick where all ideas go and nothing seems to take action. So you want to make sure it's very visible what action you took.
Yep, absolutely. You talk about NPS and also customer health scores in the book. And I know there's been some pushback against that. Any thoughts on that? Why there's the pushback and why you think it's a valuable part of analytics and getting data?
There's a lot of pushback on Net Promoter Score. I mean, first off, let's listen to the question. It's, would you recommend? Some people argue, like, have you recommended is a better question, because it's asking someone specifically whether you've done something or whether to anticipate a future question. So now the challenge I have with just switching it to did you is, like, if you're never in a position to recommend something, it's not necessarily a complete measure, right? So look, there's pros and cons with both. Some people don't like the fact that 9 and 10 is promoter, 8 and 7 are neutral, and then 6 and fewer are passive. So, detractor. Sorry, my passive. Same thing as I was using my own headspace there. Some people feel like the scoring is arbitrary. What I also see, I saw this on Twitter, I think last week, was about comparative benchmarks. People say, our NPS is 40. What's your NPS? Mm-hmm. And people say, well, you can't compare NPSs, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, how many folks in the audience, if they're product managers, they're probably used to dealing with development teams. Development teams have another measure called velocity. Also very similar metric in that people don't like comparing velocities amongst teams. It's really more of a within a team measure. So I think that's how I think about NPS. Like, I think it's often misused. And honestly, the aggregate score, it's interesting. It's a good baseline, but it's when you slice and dice it that it gets interesting. It's one thing for me to tell you my score is this. It's another thing to tell you it's up 15% from last quarter or up 100% from last year. It's also more interesting to say that this role has a higher NPS than that role. It's also more interesting if I tell you the people that use the product more tend to have better NPS. People that don't. So I think when you segment it by role, by maybe customer size, by customer tenure, like how long they've been a customer, like that's when you really start seeing interesting things. Like, for example, we ran data that shows that NPS on users that came 2 weeks or after the start of a subscription had a 10-point lower NPS score than people that started at the very beginning. Now that's actionable. So what does that tell you? There's onboarding problems, obviously, because people that are at the very beginning got great onboarding, and people that came in later didn't. 10-point difference. Same methodology. So I think these are the kinds of things where we take action. It's all about how you slice and dice this number. Is it perfect? No number is perfect. But I can tell you, if I ask someone, would you recommend me? And they tell me one, and then they give me good qualitative reasons why, I'll keep doing that survey all day long. I mean, I'm getting value out of it. And for me, it's a notion of being connected to my customer. It's live voice to the customer. Like, we have our NPS connected to our Slack. People are like driving in NPS scores. We're commenting on them. We're talking about them. We're like enlisting support for them. I mean, you asked about leading indicators. Yeah, we jump on it if we see it. That's awesome. That's useful to me.
Yeah, it's just the danger of analytics is getting hooked on a number and forgetting what's behind that number, which is really the important thing, is what's driving that and the whys and how you can solve for it. Yeah, interesting. So feature flagging, this is a new thing that's happening. Are you seeing a lot of people using this? And how can you manage this and releases, and what's the best way to manage new features?
Well, I mean, I love these things. They're great. I think we as an industry have been looking for this to solve this problem. And we have this problem of this. We want our development teams to go super, super, super fast. I mean, we love this idea of them building things, shipping things, releasing them, and no one wants to be that person that says, "Oh no, don't ship this. Like, hold this in the repo for like 6 stale code sitting in a repo, like not going to customers. Like, that doesn't feel good. Like the faster you can get something out, we all know, like, this is part of the agile development techniques, ship. Now the problem is our customers and users, they can't keep up with all that shipment. They just can't. I complained earlier about my iPad updating, and I think I hit the button to tell it to update. So I explicitly did it. Imagine if things are just happening, right? So I think we have this impedance mismatch, as I like to call it. I'm an electrical engineer, between the rate in which we want to ship things and the rate in which our users can consume things. And feature flag are an obvious answer to that challenge. It allows you to still have things shipped, but control which user or set of users get access to this. And you can do this on a variety of different fashions. You can have different staged releases. You can have randomness in it, where I'm just doing some sort of control group. Independent of your strategy and philosophy, it's a very powerful tool. And you know what? The great news is it empowers the product manager to decide whatever they want. And so the developers are happy because they're ship. And to be honest, it's also good from a risk perspective. The act of fast shipping means that performance issues, like code quality, those are caught faster when you actually go to prod, and you have the ability to roll back and things like that.
And only a fraction of users, maybe, if you're just testing it out.
Exactly. And that's the idea of a controlled rollout, is that you could have some friendlies that try the release and give you feedback. You could have, maybe you can do it on the friendliest. You can do it on the ones that pay you the most. You can do it on the ones that pay you the least. You can do it the ones that are the most risky in terms of performance. Pick your strategy. Great opportunity. Now, you also can overuse this stuff. I was talking to my team when I was realizing almost every feature they're shipping was going to some beta process. I kept asking, what are you going to learn from the beta process that you didn't know previously? And if you can't answer that question, maybe you should go right out to customers, right? But I think having the power and the flexibility is very, I think it's kind of must have for me in 2020. You kind of have to do it.
Do you see a lot of people using it?
Yeah. I see a lot of homegrown systems. I think the bulk of them are homegrown.
Yeah, 'cause there's a lot of added code, and you need to have things where you can flick things on and off and all that stuff. So.
There's added code, and then there's cleanup. Like,
yeah, exactly.
The entire set of if this, then show this little block. Like, that is not pretty. And over time, you're never going to want to like pull something back from the customer. So then I do see these like stories get written on people's backlog that are like clean up 10 old feature flags, right? Because it's an untenable mess. So you do have to think about it. Like it is going to be a maintenance piece, but I think the power and flexibility it gives you far outweighs the maintenance issues.
Mm-hmm. Does Launch Darkly or I think Optimizely has some stuff for this. Do those tools make it any easier, or is it really just sort of a framework for doing it?
All these products are great products. I mean, I think we're blessed now in the product community with a set of great products. It's Launch Darkly, Optimizely, and Split. I think there could be, so I apologize if you're out there and I forgot to name your products, but I think they all. I don't think any of them get around the fact you got to code it into your code. So I think they all three kind of have to work. You got to put the if statements around and things like that. I think there's different powers around how you manage the rollout, the release, the connection to things like Jira if you desire that. I think they all have a variety of features that help you manage it more effectively.
Yeah. So, I mean, Pendo's great at providing that quantitative data. At what point do you realize that you need to get some more qualitative data and get some user feedback? And how do you know when to, do some user research or user testing?
Well, we also, we have mechanisms for attaching some or capturing some qualitative data as well in terms of polls, NPS,
that's true, yeah.
Feedback requests. So, I think if you see something and you have a question why, that's a great time to use qualitative data. Like if you see someone not using something, or you see someone using it and then ceasing to use it, that's a great opportunity to run an experiment. We'll run campaigns on new features that targeting users who tried the feature but stopped using it with hey, will you do a call with our product team to help discuss why. So there's never, ever, ever going to be a place where we don't want to talk to customers. Mm-hmm. Be a lot smarter now about which customers we wish to talk to based on various characteristics we're trying to measure and visualize.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you guys have like a full UX research team there? Or
yeah.
How do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, team probably could be bigger, but it's any major feature where we have questions, we're going to be doing UX research.
So switching gears a little bit to strategy, what have you found are sort of the best ways for creating a roadmap, product strategy, prioritizing tech debt, determining what features to ship first, impact effort? Like, how do you guys determine that at Pendo?
You said what's the best, or how we do at Pendo. I don't know how we're doing at Pendo right now. Admittedly, is the best. So I mean, just to be transparent. So look, I think whatever your strategy is, be intentional. So being intentional means having a strategy and communicating that strategy so everyone knows what it is. The biggest failure point I see for most companies is just put something out there and not describe the how and why you got to it. In the book, I introduce or share a little bit of some of SAFE's Scaled Agile Frameworks model for coming up with weighted shortest job first scores on features. I've done that in the past. That does work. I've experimented with the numerator, which is the value, of course, measures in a variety of ways. I've even used like planning poker. I've even done it with customers. So on that top line, so like getting customers directly involved, if you're capable of doing that, is fine. One of the styles I like is this whole multi-horizon view of product prioritization. There's this horizon 1, which is affecting your business in the near term, near to 1 year. Horizon 2, kind of 1 to 3, and Horizon 3, 3 to 5. And thinking about your blend of strategies is some combination of working initiatives therein. Now, what I find is for most companies, like building 3 to 5 year initiatives, those Horizon 3, either they never happen or very rarely happen because we're very now focused as an industry. Mm-hmm. But you should be thinking about a healthy balance between Horizon 1, which is today, versus not. So,
yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in like KPIs and just shipping things to bolster those and whatnot. In terms of organizations, as companies move to product-led, and I have a bias because Modus, we tend to work with a lot of companies in the process of digital transformation and the process of doing this. So I'm wondering, what are things that can help them shift? How can they get product sort of more to the center of the organization in terms of their organizational strategy, and also more to the outside and interfacing with their customers?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we're seeing a rise in product management more in these traditional businesses, and we're even seeing rise of roles like chief product officer, chief digital officer in these organizations, as well as a signal to the market that product does matter. I think when product managers reside within business units and there isn't a centralized function, they tend to get lost. Mm-hmm. And tend to have a lack of executive influence that helps them drive business initiatives. So I think having centralized product org, executive buy-in, chief product officer, chief digital officer is a great way to I've seen that work.
Interesting. And product ops, at what point do companies sort of move to that framework?
I like product ops too. I've talked about that in the book. I think product ops is an awesome role. Actually, I can even speak very personally to the impacts that in our company. I mean, the reality is what product ops does, product managers are doing forever anyway. They're just one of the many extra things on a product manager's to-do list that unfortunately would be some of the items that always kind of dropped off the to-do list when they got super busy, like doing discovery with customers or working with engineers in the throes of a release. So, but it's everything from managing the tool stack to making sure the data is consistent across the teams, to managing some of the feedback process, data process, how we roll out features, all these things. It's nice to have an owner and coordinated. So our product ops team is very, very busy, and it took a lot of our product managers' plate.
I like it because it takes sort of the things that all the teams would use and puts them in a centralized place so that everyone's sort of running off of the same. It helps. It seems to me it would help an enterprise really coordinate when you have a lot of cross-functional things going on.
Agreed.
Someone asked about the flow framework. Are you familiar with that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I was going to try to Google it.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
A friend of mine, Mick Kirsten. So I think Mick's amazing. So I'll have. It's a shame on me for not knowing his framework. So I will go read about that. So.
And then he had another question about if an organization uses a lot of third-party software to sort of do things, how do you sort of align that to the business function and software systems?
I really like that question. I almost brought that up earlier. So I was thinking about that. This is a trend I'm seeing. The trend I'm seeing is that people are starting to treat their third-party software as a product itself. And this is particularly products that are heavily customized. If you think about Salesforce.com, I don't know if folks out there use Salesforce. I mean, screens are custom, certainly custom fields, there's workflows, there's also, I've never been in a company where their Salesforce instance is the same. So how is it not a product? It is a product. It is a product. And the people that own it are product managers, and they have stakeholders. And those stakeholders are, there's executive stakeholders, there's individual contributor stakeholders. So I think thinking about your core strategic third-party software as a product, it's the future. It's how, and I think you'll start seeing people hiring product managers from that role. because the products your employees use are, aren't they critically important? I mean, if an employee can't do their job without software, and this software is getting in the way, isn't that hurting the company? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course it is. So I think that's a really, really interesting way. So hire product managers for your internal software, just like you do it for external software, and that's how you solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you just apply best practices product management. Only you can't do as much. Yeah. You don't have as much control.
But you can go back. I mean, look, can you do as much? Yeah, it depends on the platform. Salesforce, you literally can do anything. You can do a lot. Yeah. But other products you can't. But what you can do is you can go back to the vendor and you can press them. Mm-hmm. Just like our product team may press our hosting provider because it's not doing certain things. But yeah, absolutely. I think there's a great opportunity. So
awesome. So we're getting close to the end. We just have a few minutes left. What do you think is going to happen? What's in store for the future of product management? Where are we going?
Well, look, I talked a little about product managers taking over internal apps. I think that's interesting. I think when you do that, you're going to see the rise of more and more product managers. So I think this is the golden age of product management. Great time to be in it. I think, as I said earlier, you're going to see more and more chief product officers, I think, emerge in traditional businesses. So that's also very, very good for product. I think we're on the early days of the digital transformation. I know that term's often overused, but there's still a lot of companies that can be doing a lot more in digital. I think the other interesting fact is, and I kind of touched on this when we talk about product-led growth or even product-led customer success, this whole notion of cross-functional product teams. Like an onboarding team may have someone from CS, but someone from product design, engineering, all sprinkled on. A growth team would probably have marketing, sales, product. Having these cross-functional product teams, which own areas of the business, that kind of maybe dotted line to product. I mean, that's the interesting stuff. I think the future of product is more creative org structures. And
do you think there'll be a diversification of product management? People that are just like growth product managers or
specialists. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be easy. There's a transference of skills that's pretty light between these different roles. But yeah, I think there absolutely will be specialization.
And what about Pendo? What's the roadmap such that you can talk? What are your plans for the future?
You've teased some of it out, or everyone else has. I mean, I do think that we already have a growing number of customers who are using Pendo on internally facing apps, employee facing apps. You'll see a lot more from us next year around that, and potentially even third-party apps, which we have yet to do. I think the other big aspect is, we're constantly looking at ways we can help our customers become more product-led. And one of the specific areas I'm looking at is in the area of self-service. Like, can we deliver modules to customers that can help their users self-serve more effectively? And maybe even introduce things like gamification of usage. But I think those are some areas that I'm pretty hot on. So
interesting. So getting more into the product side of things and sort of integrating, tools and things that can help them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Todd. It's been a really interesting chat for me. I've appreciated your time, and I think it's been very enlightening.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everyone else, too. Great being here.
Thanks, everyone. And just a last note, we are currently looking for a product manager we call them product strategists at Modus, ideally in the DC area, but anywhere U.S. for remote companies. So I welcome going to moduscreate.com/careers and sending us your resume. Yeah. And thanks everyone for coming. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say likewise. We're looking for product managers too. So if anyone's out there, please contact us.
All right. Thanks everyone, and have a great afternoon, rest of the morning, depending where you are. Bye now. See you, Todd.
See you.